let's get started. Again, our theme is holidays, and my story is called Santa's Misfits. It's a snowy Saturday, December 1970-something or other. My sister Valerie is home from boarding school. I remind her there's a tree in the corner of our small living room where the Hi-Fi and Mantovani records are normally kept. She's blind, since birth. When she's home, we listen to Lions Club audiobooks together, Charlotte's Web, Laura Ingalls Wilder, Valley of the Dolls, which I'm pretty sure was sent by mistake. Born very prematurely, Valerie is also developmentally delayed, which affects her ability to mature. She's a young 16. I'm an old 7. My dad and his first wife named her Valerie for the valor she showed as a baby, her will and determination. She is kind, gentle, and bossy. Valerie is also my hometown's smallest baby to survive premature birth. A reporter from the Wisconsin State Journal newspaper told us that. They wanted to write about her. My mother explained Valerie's, what at the time were called handicaps. The article was never written. People aren't always ready to know the truth about people like Valerie. As far as I'm concerned, that's their loss. She's unflappable, joyful, an auto heart playing, hymn-loving miracle. Our father isn't drunk. He's not sober either. He's in between, like twilight. If we get him laughing, it might be a good day. If he tells a war story, things will get dark. Today could go either way. Poor, dumb Don is with him. Poor, dumb Don, my dad's sidekick. Not a kind nickname, to be sure, nor is it apt. Don isn't dumb, he's weak. The nickname betrays Don's sweetness. He's a good guy, but desperate. He'll lie or steal to feed his addiction, but that's not his nature. It's his consequence. He's Ratso Rizzo to my dad's Midnight Cowboy. My dad, also an addict, loves making children. Once they're born, it's problematic. He doesn't quite know what to do with them. My mother only expects small things like taking the boys for a haircut. Instead, my dad throws $5 to Don to play nanny. I come home with a David Cassidy shag. My father yells, "Jesus Christ, Don, his hair is longer than before you took him to the barber." So, Don loses a battle of wills to a 7-year-old. Hallelujah, an excuse for them both to drink. I toss back my feathered hair and laugh at the folly of it all, certain that when it's in my control, life will make more sense. It will be exceptional. Don and Dad are drinking whiskey in our half-finished basement rec room. I'm skating around framed-in walls, monitoring blood alcohol levels, when they decide Santa Claus should visit. A manic, booze-filled plan is soon in place. Neighborhood kids are invited over. Dad puts on the Johnny Mathis Christmas album and passes out 15-cent, half-sized Nestle Crunch bars. I'm the only one near the kitchen window when a wobbly wooden ladder, normally kept on the rack of my dad's Badger Edition Ford pickup, is propped against the house. Poor, dumb, drunken Don is dressed as Santa. How the hell did they get a Santa suit? I can't ask because he is climbing up the ladder. He begins to stomp across the roof. The children follow my dad to the living room picture window just in time to see Don slip off our roof. His fall is broken by a springy pine tree and a forever since that day dented aluminum awning. He lands on a mattress of shrubs just before a pile of built-up snow lands on his head. A scene Norman Rockwell forgot to paint. Don brushes himself off, straightens his beard, and heads to the front door. My father answers. Like the rest of us, he knows to narrate the action for Valerie. "Look, kids, it's Santa Claus." Sometimes love is quiet. Despite my cocky 7-year-old swagger of knowing the truth, I say nothing to destroy the illusion. Somehow, they have presents for everyone. I get a Buster Brown shoehorn. My little brother gets a toy truck I'm pretty sure was already his. I don't remember Valerie's gift, but I can still see her normally closed eyes growing wide, hugging Santa Claus, her finger eyes running through his beard. It's a special moment. A memory designed by two guys from whom the world doesn't expect all that much. Somewhere, there's a Polaroid of all us kids standing next to a bloodshot, bruised, secondhand smoke meets Canadian club-infused Santa. Lost to the ages, just like Don and my dad. Later that evening, Mom passes through the living room and says, "What a day, meeting Santa Claus." Valerie, as usual, is thoughtful. Her head cranes to make sure the grown-ups are out of earshot before she whispers, "Greg, you know that was poor dumb Don, right?" Thank you. And our next reader is Pamela Zaitchik.
Holidays, joy, smiles, fun for some. So many holidays to celebrate. Mother's Day, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. The first Mother's Day after the loss of my firstborn daughter, my mother-in-law asked how I was doing when I stopped over to bring her a gift. When I said, "Not good," she said, "Why, your mother is okay." Hard to believe anyone could be so thoughtless. Thanksgiving 1983 was the last time I spoke to my daughter Jody. She, 20 years old, had driven herself to California soon after graduating from Monticello High. But first, that summer, she met a group in Germany that was building a yoga retreat. She bragged to me about how she was the only female who they allowed to use the large equipment. She unexpectedly presented herself to me the evening of her return at the Nevele Hotel where I worked, announcing she had just hitchhiked from the airport. Because of her recent hiking through Europe with two Italian girls, I needed to remind her that she was in the States now, and in New York, hiking wasn't safe anymore, even though it used to be a way of getting around in our area. After 2 years in California, she decided to find herself by hiking the Pacific Crest Trail that goes from Mexico, where they started, to Canada. Her partner, Jerry, 35-year-old Vietnam vet, was also looking to find himself. She was wearing a 60-pound pack, quite an undertaking for a person not quite 5 feet tall, but she was tough. That was well before Cheryl Strayed wrote the book Wild about her trip on the same trail. Jody had called me in October to apprise me that she was planning the trip. I advised her to wait until the spring, and I would even fly out and meet them on the trail. She was not an experienced winter hiker. She said, "I have to go now," and I believed she did, and there was no changing her mind. She would call me collect whenever they got off the trail to buy food. Remember, no cell phones in those days. She told me that Thanksgiving that she was going to the movies in Big Bear. All was well, and wished me a happy Thanksgiving and said she would call again soon. It was getting close to Christmas and I had not heard from her again. Her father, drug addicted at the time, called to ask when we would start worrying about her. We agreed that we would wait until Christmas before assuming anything was wrong. Of course, I was already worried. She was not the type that acted irresponsibly, like not call home, which some of my friends offered as an explanation. In fact, she and Jerry had gotten caught after hiking 360 miles in an ice storm. And in the morning, when they awakened and walked from their tent to the trail, they slid off the mountain, falling over 450 feet. Their bodies were found by a horse-mounted rescue team. It was difficult to find them since I really had no idea exactly where they were. Fortunately, her father had mailed her a package that she had not yet picked up, and they located the woman at the movies who remembered her as being one of the sweetest young people she had ever met. Her father pulled me on New Year's Eve as I was just stepping into the shower about 8 p.m. I shut the water and heard him say, in all his drugged craziness, "She's gone." After calling him an effing liar, I got a call from the Parks Department that corroborated his information. Remarkably, that evening I was to go down the road where a friend was having people over. I got a call in the afternoon that canceled it because her nephew was killed in an automobile accident on the way back to school. I thought about that poor mother, my friend's sister, who I knew, who would always suffer such a horrible loss on a holiday that was supposed to be only about joy in the coming year. It's still hard to believe that it would also be my fate. Thank goodness for the healing that takes place with time. I couldn't wait to get back to work. Staying home left too much time for suffering. I have to say that finding my spiritual connection was the biggest help in healing. Friends and loved ones were much more sensitive than my mother-in-law and showed their love and caring by calling me every New Year's just to let me know that they were thinking about me and gave me time to speak about my daughter. 40 years later, though I still get queasy approaching Thanksgiving, I am able now to wish you all Merry Christmas, bright Hanukkah, and a happy and healthy New Year. Penelope Garrity.
Hi there. New Year's Eve's foggy. On a cold New Year's Eve of 1968, my fiancé, a medical student from Ghana, and I stepped out onto the balcony of a high-rise apartment building in Toronto. We huddled together in the freezing weather. Few Ghanaians could imagine the brutal force of that winter wind high above the streets of Toronto. And no Canadian would understand why I planned to be out in the open in a skimpy party dress. Put it down to the craziness of two foolish lovers who were trying for a big engagement moment on New Year's Eve. And what a moment it could have been. The stars above were like frosty diamonds in the northern sky, standing in as magnificent proxies for the diamond ring we could not afford. But we had drawn our heads into our hunched, shivering shoulders and did not look up at the stars. Hurry was all I said. Kwaku uttered the formal phrase, "Will you marry me?" "Yes," I cried, as I pushed him back inside, ending our 60-second engagement ceremony without even a kiss. A month later, Kwaku came to me and made a sudden announcement. "I think we should reconsider our engagement." "We were going to move to Ghana together," he said, "after finishing our studies. But recently, I heard some things about marriages like ours in Ghana. When Ghanaian students bring back foreign wives from abroad, their marriages usually fail." I reacted with anger to this devastating news. "You painted Ghana as wonderful, and your culture is rich and welcoming. So, were you lying? Now you're weaseling out our engagement with the worst excuse I've ever heard." saying that your country and your dreams for the future were all a fantasy. No, no, he replied. What I told you was just the truth. My country is wonderful. It just wasn't the whole picture. I said, please, listen. So he gave me the whole picture in the form of a shocking list. 1. Some Ghanaian students abroad do not consult their extended family about marriage. This alienates the family, and they blame the girl and reject her. 2. Often the student has not told the foreign bride the truth about his family's social or economic status in Africa, and she is disappointed and angry when she has to live in a less affluent way than she expected. 3. Is it accepted? It is accepted that the Ghanaian extended family can intrude on a couple's private life with advice and may insist a husband take a second wife. 4. Some Ghanaian families expect to receive gifts, sewing machines, generators, even cars from their returning sons. Students are usually too poor to do this. Last of all, African American wives of Ghanaian students have the same difficulties there as white women. So skin color is not the problem. It's our whole family structure and our customs. Kweku said, in conclusion, I had no way to argue about it, for I had no clear knowledge of Ghana. But I knew that my lifetime's happiness depended on making a wise decision about our upcoming marriage. But I did know one thing. Ghana, its people, and its customs were not going to change simply on my account. Days of silence followed. And then Kweku made a second announcement. Before we are married, I want you to visit Ghana and meet my family. This will solve our biggest problem. Maybe, I said. When should we go? Not until after your graduation this June. Not we, he replied. Just you. Me, alone, without you? Are you crazy? Nobody sends a fiancé off alone to Africa, to a developing country which has been independent a mere 12 years. But Kweku could be very persuasive. If you travel to Ghana, he said, and greet my family in a traditional way before we are married, you will honor them and they will accept you. Family is really the only big problem for us. Now we know the situation. But why go alone? Admit it, Kweku said with a grin. If we went together, the trip would be like a honeymoon. Anything you experienced would be seen through the haze of our romantic love. Look, we're sure of our love. Let's be sure you want to maintain it in Ghana. For a reliable decision, you have to go alone and look at everything with clear eyes. But there was a twinkle in his eye, and his grin widened into his usual face-changing smile. What was he smiling about that I didn't get? What was he holding back? And then I got it. Kweku was gambling. He was betting that once there, I would love Ghana and its people as much as he did. He was proud of his country and his family, and was willing to stake our happiness on the outcome of my visit. At the same time, he was placing our fate as a couple entirely in my hands. Where had I found such an amazing man? Which outcome is your money on? I said years ago. No answer was needed. I was going to Africa. I was going alone. That was the point. Sorry. The next speaker is John Ronan.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Christmas lights. How many light bulbs do you need to make the holidays happy? My mother thought a string of 12 large ones sufficient, the same string used to brighten her English childhood home at Christmas time. I thought it should be more, way more. I wanted lights like ones I'd seen in other homes, ones with delicate bulbs set in plastic florets, ones with tinsel surrounds that dazzled and glistened, strings of 20 bulbs, or even 40, like I'd counted on other people's Christmas trees. Better still, multiple strings, including bulbs that bubble. But a string of 12 is what we had, and what was used to light our tree, despite me badgering for more. Mum was in charge of Christmas. She organised everything and made sure no one felt left out or forgotten. Preparation started in the autumn with the baking of fruitcakes and puddings. Dad was responsible for getting a tree, setting it in a container and situating it in our living room to the left of our black and white TV. Not in the window recess to the right of the TV, where I thought it would look great and it could be seen from outside. Such placement was deemed too showy. Okay for others, like our neighbours across the road, but not us. We were private people. We always drew our curtains at dusk. For 50 weeks of the year, our Christmas decorations sat in a cardboard box on top of Dad's wardrobe. Contained with the lights were spare bulbs, baubles, tinsel, crepe paper streamers, plus a Christmas fairy or two. After placement of the lights, my siblings and I got to decorate the tree. The hanging of Christmas chocolates, apt to go missing, was held back until Christmas Eve. One year, my siblings and I discovered a special bulb in the box. When swapped for the first bulb in our string, it caused the lights to switch on and off. To say the lights flashed would be an exaggeration. It was the slowest on, off, on. You can imagine. But when you live on a small village farm and yearn for flashing lights, you take what you can get. A lame flash is better than no flash. I petitioned hard to keep the bulb permanently installed. Mum, please can we keep the flasher? Please? But Mum said flashing lights gave her a headache and affected her nerves. The bulb was returned to the Christmas box, but I never forgot it was there. The top of the tree is where Mum focused her attention. It was there she placed a fairy each year, though not always the one from the previous year. I don't know if she assessed that last year's was no longer up for the job, or she simply fancied a change. A fairy that was selected for a consecutive year was out to get a makeover, thus providing Mum an opportunity to employ her dressmaking skills on a miniature scale. Though we were a family of 5, a 6th person was thought to lurk in our midst. His name was Mr. Nobody. Not surprisingly, we never caught a glimpse of Mr. Nobody. He's the person my father assumed was the culprit for any misdeeds neither my siblings nor I took responsibility for. For instance, when no one owned up to eating all the chocolates hanging from the Christmas tree, Dad concluded, "Oh, I suppose it was Mr. Nobody." When someone reinserted the flasher in the string of lights, I guess it was Mr. Nobody. Christmas wasn't the same after Mum left. Banished by my father. Banished by my father the day he discovered she was having an affair. For a few years we followed the traditions, rules and Christmas tree ritual that she set in place, but the innocence of the world I grew up in was gone. The Christmas prior to Mum's departure, she placed a tinsel star at the top of our tree instead of a fairy. It was placed there each year thereafter. Decades later, when my siblings and I cleared my father's house, I thought we might come across the box of decorations, but did not. I did, however, find a partially filled notepad with Mum's writing in it. Contained within was a list of friends, relatives and neighbours, most long deceased. Jotted alongside each name was her idea for their Christmas gift. Seeing the list reminded me how hard Mum worked with a tight budget to make Christmas time special for all. As an adult, I have avoided establishing any form of Christmas tradition. A part of me knows that to do so invites risk that someday it may go away. This year, my partner Dan and I cut a Christmas tree with our young friend Frank, who was visiting from China. Dan refers to him as John's adopted son. Later, we decorated the tree with vintage lights reminiscent of Mum's string of 12. Crazy though it may sound, we have a whopping 72 bulbs. And the tree is proudly displayed on the porch, outside our living room window, for all to see. Who knows, maybe next year the lights will flash. Happy holidays. Next up is Teresa Tulipano.
I mean, how do you follow that? With this. A hero's dose. I was 18 in the holiday season of 1988, working at Tower Books in Concord, California, next to Tower Records and Tower Video. 3 separate storefronts that shared a labyrinthian back room. Between the 3 stores, there were 35 staff on shift at a time, but in December, to handle the non-stop onslaught of holiday shoppers, there were 60 of us. There was an all-hands-on-deck vibe that was not merry, but I actually worked better under pressure, keeping the register line moving for hours without a break. Tower was an employment haven for weirdos, outcasts, goths, mods, punks, metalheads. But the bookstore was where the straight-up nerds worked, myself included. Our receiving clerk, Rizzo, thought he was the coolest of us all. He only listened to Metallica and talked about the karate studio where he was learning kill with his hands. He was short, with long, thinning black hair, and he revved his motorcycle, tearing out of the parking lot at the end of every shift. Sean was British, tall, stout, had large teeth and bristly hair. He was sweet but sheltered and very dorky. Sean idolized Rizzo, so he went to the sketchy bar where Rizzo drank and desperately pretended to be tough. This is how Sean somehow got a biker to front him a pound of magic mushrooms, which Sean coolly assured the guy he could move. But Sean had never seen an illegal drug in his life, and he had absolutely no idea how much a pound of shrooms really was. I, however, had gone to high school in Miami in the mid-'80s, and I had done most of the illegal drugs before I reached the age of 16. I was keenly aware of how enormous a pound of shrooms was and how hard it would be to sell. Sean nervously told me the biker had jokingly threatened that he would kill him if he didn't get his $2,000 in a week. I stared hard at Sean. I liked him, and I knew he was in real trouble. The pressure of the situation kicked me into gear. The next thing I knew, I was telling him it was simple. He just had to set up shop in the back room and sell the shrooms to the employees of all 3 tower stores after 5 p.m. when the managers went home. Jimmy from the record store sold bags of weed, so I knew he always kept a 3-beam scale in his trunk. Sean spread newspapers across Rizzo's desk, and a bunch of us helped him weigh and bag up 8s, 128 of them. Shrooms were hard to come by, so the line of employees in the back room rivaled the lines of customers in all 3 stores. Johnny, a supervisor, said it would be fun if everyone took shrooms while working. And without thinking it through, the whole bookstore staff and most of the record and video staff were munching on the foul-tasting fungi. I ate all of 1/8 and half of another because the shrooms in Miami were pretty weak and you needed a lot of them. These shrooms, it turned out, were extremely potent, and I had mistakenly taken what is known as a hero's dose, with 5 hours of my shift left to work. Within a half hour, we were all yawning and the store lights were getting extra sparkly. I lost a coin toss, so was on the register, and I wish I could tell you that I managed to play it cool as the drugs hit. In actuality, every customer turned into an elf. And I started giggling during each transaction, sometimes having to duck down behind the counter to laugh until I could breathe again, only to pop back up and charge the bewildered elf for their books. Within an hour, my cheeks ached from grinning, and I was telling people I could see their holiday spirit auras, and warning the Grinchy ones that they might be on the naughty list this year. It had to be clear, the whole staff was tripping balls because Karen took 10 minutes to wrap each book. And Gina was building an oversized art book fort in the poetry alcove, which staff had to crawl into without knocking it over. Heather was skipping through the store, flinging tinsel and singing carols. And Jack was chortling as he rearranged the magazine wall, facing out the smuttiest magazines that were normally hidden on the top shelf. I had the sensation that my heartbeat was syncing up to Little Drummer Boy. Ba-dum-ba-bum-bum. And I panicked because it felt too slow. Bookshelves undulated, walls breathed, floors rippled, the cash register throbbed, lights surged and dimmed rhythmically, and the customers resembled a stream of Santa's helpers. I giggled helplessly My face slipped with tears for hours. When we locked the door on the last customer at 9 p.m., the store in utter shambles. Sean had made $2,500 with only 3 baggies left unsold, and my cash register balanced as perfectly as a 3-beam scale, not a penny over, not a penny short.
All right, this is called Hard Candy Christmas. I'm standing on the side of the highway in the midst of a whiteout-style blizzard, bundled up to my eyeballs. The minivan, which my boyfriend and his family and I were just in, is slowly sliding backwards down the hill with a Christmas tree strapped onto it. I notice the decal on the back of the car. Those decals are supposed to feature your family. I've never quite grasped the desire to express oneself via baby on board stickers or cartoons of moms, dads, and 2.5 kids. However, as I watch the car roll slowly down the hill, the peril and the cheery iconography of the traditional American family create a striking juxtaposition, a word that has found itself into every single college paper I've ever written. It all feels very poignant in this particular moment. How did I end up here? Well, it all begins with Dolly Parton. A week earlier, I'm sitting on my couch listening to Hard Candy Christmas by Dolly Parton. It's a song about feeling sad during Christmas, and it seems fitting as I'm about to board a plane to be with my boyfriend and his family after his mother's just died. They love Dolly Parton, but more than anything, they fucking love Christmas. Part of this is cultural. Even when it's not Christmas in Maine, it's kind of Christmas in Maine. Maine as a state is Christmas coded the way that Miami is cocaine coded. It's just in their blood. Ethan's mom in particular loved Christmas. She loved the decorations and the fact that Ethan and all his siblings were born around Christmas, her vintage ornaments, wrapping presents, and the scent of pine trees. So it felt like a cruel irony in the Alanis Morissette sense of the word that she died just a few weeks before Christmas. I understand my primary responsibility in all of this is to be a distraction for everyone. I'm the relatively new girlfriend, having met his family only once before. I'm also from New York City, making me an oddity, much like a dog wearing a dumb little hat. And if there's one thing I know how to do, it's how to lean into making fun of myself when I feel like an outsider. Growing up in a Washington Heights building in New York City where I was the only white kid taught me how to lean hard into self-mockery. The pressure is on, but this is my Olympics. Upon arrival at the house, as expected, Ethan's family is seeking a distraction. Ethan has 3 sisters, which just first off, too many sisters. 1 sister is a lot, 3 sisters, way too many. It's like when a group of crows is called a murder, I believe a group of sisters is a coven of sisters. I could tell you their names, but you'd lose track, so I'll call them Responsible Sister, Loud Sister, and Silly Sister. Ethan is the youngest and only boy. For a while, it seems to be working. There are some amusing cultural observations about New Yorkers that everyone finds unbelievable. First is that I have no idea how to drive a car. This astonishes Ethan's dad, who, I should mention, because this is Maine, does not call it a car, but instead calls it a car. There are no R's in Maine. The Maine accent falls somewhere between friendlier Boston and drunker Canadian with just a sprinkling of old-timey ship's captain. It's only a few days before Christmas, and with everything going on, they've yet to get a tree. They debate going to the Christmas tree farm versus the easy route of buying a pre-cut one. That's when I ask, wait, so you cut down your own tree? This revelation blows everyone's mind, as I confess I've never cut down my own Christmas tree, and furthermore did not even realize this was an option. Loud Sister asks, so how do you get Christmas trees in New York City? I explain, a guy would set up shop with a bunch of trees on a busy intersection, usually near a bodega, and you would buy trees from him. My dad's favorite tactic was to wait until the day before Christmas when the trees would go on sale and then buy one. It's decided then and there that it's a moral imperative that we have to go to the Christmas tree farm and cut down our own tree. Ethan's dad stays back, but Ethan, the coven of sisters, and a smattering of their children and I all pile into Responsible Sisters' minivan to go cut down a tree. The Christmas tree farm in Maine is magical. It's peak Christmas. There's mulled cider, twinkling lights, freshly fallen snow, and the children are throwing snowballs at each other. I feel like I'm in a Hallmark Christmas movie, a big city girl discovering the magic of a small town when she meets a lumberjack. However, since we are, by Maine standards, pretty late to the Christmas tree game, the trees are all picked over. There aren't any good ones left, really. There are the pre-cut ones at the front, which everyone tells me are a scam and overpriced, and we shouldn't even look at them because real Mainers cut down their own trees, bub. After a few hours, we find one that's decent. Since it started to snow and it's coming down pretty hard, we decide it's good enough. We proceed to cut it down, strap it to the roof of the minivan, and head off. Which brings us back to the beginning of our story. As we drive, it gets snowier, and Ethan and the coven assure me that this is nothing snow-wise for Maine. They seem less reassured, especially as we start to climb one hill in particular and the van starts sliding all over the road. Responsible Sister says, maybe you should all get out, and we do, except for Ethan, who is now attempting to drive the car up the hill, but it's sliding backwards more than forwards. Silly Sister turns to me and says, well, I bet this wasn't how you were expecting this to go, huh? I mutter something like no, but she can't hear me through my layers. After a few minutes of sliding all over the road, Ethan manages to make it to the top of the hill. We all walk to meet him. The snow has slowed and we continue back to the house, which Google Maps tells me is 20 minutes away, but it takes us twice that time to get back there. When we arrive back, unstrap the tree, and bring it inside, Ethan's dad comes out and looks at it, looks at our weary faces, and hears tales of the minivan. He says, well, that's kind of small, don't you think? By which he means Barbara would have fucking hated this tree. So the next morning, Ethan goes out and buys the biggest pre-cut scam tree he can find. Like Dolly Parton says in Hard Candy Christmas, we'll all be fine and dandy.
Wonderful job, everybody. Thank you so much. That is the last Yarnslingers of 2023.